Notre Dame is set to head to Atlanta to take on Georgia Tech, and this Yellow Jacket program loves to play the role of spoiler under head coach Brent Key. So can the Irish build on their success from last week and avoid an upset? That's next on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and I'm thrilled to have you here on Thursday, October 17th. And thanks for starting your day right here by making this your first listen of the day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. Plus, you can watch every episode on YouTube. For those of you watching along on YouTube, this is your reminder to please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please take a quick second, rate the show 5 stars, and maybe even leave a review if you've got some time. And of course, subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Quick programming note, though, before we get rolling here, I will be doing another mailbag tomorrow morning, as we do every Friday during the season. So remember, submit your questions in the YouTube comments, or you can send them in on social media. The X account is @LockedOnIrish, and the Instagram is @LockedOnIrishPod. But as for today, it is time to preview Notre Dame's upcoming game against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. I'm going to share my scouting report, keys to the game for the Irish, and of course, my predictions at the end. But let's start with what you need to know. So, kickoff is set for 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. So, I won't have a weather update for you today because it's going to be played inside of a dome. And the game is going to air on ESPN. Bob Wojciak and Louis Riddick are going to be on the call for this one, and this is going to be the 38th matchup between the two schools. Notre Dame leads the all-time series with 30 wins to 6 losses and 1 tie. Fun fact for you, Notre Dame actually first played Georgia Tech before they ever faced any of their traditional rivals like Navy, Stanford, or USC. The first meeting between Georgia Tech and Notre Dame took place way back in 1922 when Knute Rockne and his team won 13-3. This is going to be the first meeting between the two teams since 2021 when the Irish knocked off the Yellow Jackets 55-0. That's right, 55-0 against an ACC team on Senior Day. What I remember most about that game was Myron Tagovailoa Moses. I believe it was a fumble recovery for a touchdown. He was rumbling and stumbling all the way down the field after he had just dealt with some serious stuff in his life. So the fact that he was able to get that touchdown in that moment on Senior Day was just really, really special. And as you can see from that final score, things weren't great for the Yellow Jacket program back in 2021, which leads me to Brent Key, who is their new head coach, who took over as the interim in 2022, but then he led the Yellow Jackets to a 4-4 finish, and then they just promoted him to the head coach full-time of his alma mater. He has led them to a 16-12 record since he took over and a 5-2 record this season, and as I mentioned in the cold open, he loves to play the role of spoiler. He has had a habit of knocking off ranked teams. He actually started off 5-0 against ranked ACC teams in his career, so you know he is going to have this team ready to go in this one. And right now, Notre Dame is favored by 11.5 on FanDuel, and the over-under is at 49.5. But at the end of last week, Notre Dame was only favored by 8 in this one. But then there was a big shift in recent days on that line. So it went from 8 to minus 11.5 for Notre Dame, and a big reason why, at least the way I see it, is the uncertainty surrounding the health of Georgia Tech quarterback Haynes King. And that leads me to the scouting report. We're going to start by looking at the Georgia Tech offense versus the Notre Dame defense. Georgia Tech, not a very well-balanced team. Their offense has carried them up to this point, and the leader of that offense is their quarterback, Haynes King. King got hurt in the first series against North Carolina, but was actually able to play through it for most of the game, but then he ended up missing the last 3 drives of the fourth quarter. Brent Key has been pretty quiet about the details and severity of his injury. He called King day-to-day with an undisclosed injury, but I believe it's his shoulder. And if you look at his stats against North Carolina, King completed 11 of 22 passes for 127 pass yards, but he had 11 carries for 107 rush yards and 2 touchdowns. That leads me to believe that his legs are fine, but his shoulder is not. So that is something to keep an eye on for sure in the coming days. I don't think we're going to get an official word until Georgia Tech's offense takes the field for the first time. But if Haynes King cannot go, Their offensive coordinator, Buster Faulkner, is going to have to come up with a plan for backup quarterback Zach Pyron. And this is the biggest storyline for this matchup, my biggest takeaway, all of that. If Haynes King is healthy enough to play, and he's anywhere close to 100%, this is the type of offense that could put a scare in the Notre Dame defense. But if he can't, if King cannot play in this one, I just don't see how Georgia Tech is going to be able to move the ball consistently going up against this Notre Dame defense, because this is by far the best defense that Georgia Tech has had to face all season long. And if they don't have their best player, I think that's going to affect everything else they try to do on that side of the ball. The reason that Georgia Tech has been so effective this year is not only due to King's running ability, it has a lot to do with his improvement as a passer. He has completed 71% of his passes. He's thrown for over 1,500 passing yards, 8 touchdowns to just 1 interception. And that is the biggest thing for King, because he had 16 interceptions last season. He was like a turnover machine. So the fact that he only has 1 interception through 7 games is a huge development for them. But as I mentioned, he's a really good runner as well, has 62 carries, 353 rushing yards, which averages out to 5.7 yards per carry and 6 rushing touchdowns. They also have a really solid running back at number 11, Jamal Haynes, who has 536 rushing yards in the season at 5.6 yards per carry and 7 touchdowns, including a 68-yard touchdown run to beat North Carolina last week. It looked like Georgia Tech was content to just run out the clock and take that game into overtime, but then Jamal Haynes broke off a long touchdown run, sealed the game. Georgia Tech gets the win. And now when Georgia Tech has those two guys clicking, Haynes King and Jamal Haynes, it's really hard for defenses to stop them, and they are so explosive. King has 7 rushes of 20 yards or more on the season, and Jamal Haynes has 5 rushes of 30 yards or more, which is actually tied for 4th in the country, according to Jamie Uyeyama from Irish Sports Daily. So defenses have to be prepared to stop the run, but they can't just stack the box either because of King's improvement as a passer. They average 240 yards per game through the air, which is, about average, but it's pretty good when you consider the fact that they have one of the better rushing offenses in the country, and it becomes more of a threat. And they've got 2 playmakers on the outside that are really dynamic with the ball in their hands. First one to keep an eye out for, number 11, wide receiver Malik Rutherford. He's only 5'9", 170 pounds, but he's incredibly fast and difficult to bring down. He has 40 catches on the year for 509 yards, including a season-high 7 for 113 against Louisville. He is averaging 7.4 yards after catch per reception, according to Pro Football Focus. So Notre Dame is going to have to bring him down. They like to get him the ball in the short passing game and then just hope that he can make some plays in the open field. And so far this season, he's been really successful at doing just that. Another wide receiver to keep an eye out for, number 2, Eric Singleton Jr. He's not very big either. He's only 5'11", 190, but he has 30 catches for 399 yards and 2 touchdowns this year. He was actually a freshman All-American last season. He's extremely fast, and these are the 2 guys who really pose a threat to opposing teams' secondary. Also got to look at their offensive line. It shouldn't really be a surprise that a team coached by Brent Key, who was an offensive lineman himself and coached the offensive line at Alabama from 2016 through 2018 under Nick Saban, has a really good offensive line unit at Georgia Tech. They're old, they're experienced together, and they have allowed just 1 sack on the entire year, which is 1st in the country. They have given up some negative plays in the run game. They have allowed 29 tackles for loss in 7 games, but this is a good offensive line. This is going to be a big challenge for the Notre Dame defensive line, who looked really, really good last week against Stanford, but obviously this is going to be a much better unit than the one that they just saw. So my keys for the Notre Dame defense in this one, the number 1, tackle. They have to tackle and tackle and tackle. Georgia Tech has been productive on offense this year, but they have not played a defense like Notre Dame's, and if they're going to have any chance of winning, they are going to have to convert on some explosive plays. And as I told you, they are more explosive in the run game than the passing game, and Notre Dame can prevent those explosive run plays if they just tackle well. This goes for the defensive line. It goes for the linebackers, and especially the defensive backs. You got a guy like Leonard Moore who's going to be making his 2nd career start at cornerback, a true freshman. Typically, defensive backs, especially freshman defensive backs, don't love getting in the mix in the run game. Leonard Moore made a great play punching the ball out from Louisville quarterback Tyler Shuck in his 1st career start, so we know that he's not afraid to get in the mix. But there are some serious running threats on this team, and Notre Dame is going to have to wrap these guys up and get them on the ground when they have the chance. As a team, Georgia Tech has rushed for 1,432 yards in the season, and 774 of those yards came after contact. Then you add in the fact that they have over 1,000 yards of yak on the year. It tells you that this team can really make plays with the ball in their hands, and if you don't tackle them, they are going to make you pay. So Notre Dame has to tackle well in this game, or they could be in big trouble. Second key to the game, dare them to throw the ball, especially if Haynes King cannot go. Because if Haynes King can go, he can still throw the ball, but you would much rather have him throwing the ball downfield than running all over you. But if King cannot play, and Pyron is the starter, I just have no faith in his passing ability. So far this season, he has only completed 5 passes on 7 attempts. He's thrown as many interceptions as he has touchdowns for his career, 4-4, a 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Not necessarily great. And Notre Dame has not really been elite at stopping the run this year. It's not like they've been bad, but they have given up 121.3 yards per game and 3.4 yards per carry. Neither of those are in the top 30 nationally. So Georgia Tech is going to try and challenge this defense. They're going to try to run at them. If Notre Dame is able to shut that down and force them into passing situations, it's going to be a long night for Zach Pyron or Haynes King. Like I said, Georgia Tech has been pretty good this year, especially on third down. They've converted 42% of the time, but if Notre Dame can force them into third and longs, they should be able to dominate this matchup. So overall, I really like the advantage that Notre Dame has on defense over the Georgia Tech offense if Haynes King cannot play. If he can play, he can scare you, but I still like Notre Dame's defense in this one. They just have to tackle and force him to throw the ball. All right, coming up, the Irish offense showed significant progress last week against Stanford, but can they keep that going against the Yellow Jackets? That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. If you're new to FanDuel and you're looking for something to bet on with that first $5 bet, I've got one for you. If you've been listening every day this week, you know I am on the Saints. Plus 2.5 at home against the Broncos tonight on Thursday Night Football. I know the Saints are not going to have Derek Carr. They're going to roll out with Spencer Rattler, the former Oklahoma turned South Carolina quarterback. Not many people expected him to be playing this early on in his career, which is a big reason why I think so many people are on the Broncos. That's why they're favored on the road. But you know what? I think that crowd is going to be jumping in prime time on Thursday night in the Superdome, and I think they are going to lead the Saints to a cover. I don't know if they're going to win this one, but I think they cover that plus 2.5 at home. And for more, just visit FanDuel.com today. All right, let's switch it over to the other side of the ball and look at the matchup between Notre Dame's offense going up against the Georgia Tech defense. And Georgia Tech had one of the worst defenses in the ACC last year, but they have improved significantly under their new defensive coordinator, Tyler Santucci. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because Santucci was with Duke last year, coaching under Mike Elko, and that Elko and Santucci defense gave Notre Dame fits all night long last year. And although Notre Dame only had like 3 scholarship wide receivers in that game, their offensive line was getting dominated. So that was not a fun night, but I do believe that Santucci is a really smart defensive mind. He just does not really have the personnel right now at Georgia Tech. So this is still a below average defense. When I look at this matchup, my biggest takeaway is that Notre Dame should be able to build off what they did against Stanford in the passing game because Georgia Tech is susceptible in the pass game. But I would really like to see Notre Dame get the ball to Jeremiah Love a little bit more in the run game. So Georgia Tech has been pretty solid at defending the run this year. They're 24th in the country in rush yards allowed per game at just 103.7 yards, and they're allowing just 3.6 yards per carry. And they've registered 39 tackles for loss on the year. Those are pretty good numbers. This has been huge for them on third down and red zone defense because teams will try to run on them in the early downs. They get stuffed. They're in third and long, and they just don't convert as much. Although, for as good as Georgia Tech is at stopping people on third downs, they have been really bad on fourth down. Teams have converted 11 out of 16 fourth down attempts this season against the Yellow Jackets, which is a pretty weird number. Part of me thinks it might just be bad luck when you consider just how good they are on third down. But still, that is something to keep in mind for Notre Dame because Marcus Freeman has been aggressive specifically on fourth downs. Let's talk about that pass defense. Teams have passed for 223.7 yards per game and 11.9 yards per completion against the Yellow Jackets. Both of those numbers are outside the top 80 nationally. So this is not a very good secondary, but it's not all their fault, right? Because this is one of the worst teams in the entire country at pressuring the quarterback. They have just 9 sacks on the year. And they played 7 games. And 3 of those 9 sacks were against the FCS opponent. So their sack total with the full 9 ranks 104th in the entire country, and it should honestly be lower than that when you consider the quality of competition that they played. According to Pro Football Focus, they are 132nd out of 134 schools in pass rush grade, so theoretically, Riley Leonard should have all day to throw. They can't really stop the run, but if Notre Dame is able to give Riley Leonard time, he actually has been pretty good as a passer, specifically as of late. There are a couple guys to keep an eye out for on this Georgia Tech defense, though. Number 44, right off the bat, dude. Linebacker Kyle Efford. He's the current team leader in tackles right now with 52 total. He's got a sack, and he's got 25 stops, according to PFF. And my favorite thing about him is his look. Like, his football aesthetic is awesome. And I remember watching that Florida State-Georgia Tech game, the season opener, and I saw 44 running around there. I was like, whoa, who is that guy? Because he's just got, like, the neck roll going. He looks like an old-school, mean middle linebacker, but he can play, like, he's not just one of those old-school Mike linebackers who just comes down north and south and just tries to blow up the A-gap every single play. Effort can move a little bit laterally, so Notre Dame is going to have to watch out for him. And they're also going to have to watch out for number 99, defensive lineman Jordan Vandenberg. He has the highest PFF grade of anyone on the Georgia Tech defense. 9 tackles on the year, 8 pressures, and 8 stops in just 189 snaps. So he's not played as much as the other guys, but when he's been out there, he has certainly been effective. Number 0, linebacker, Trinelius Tatum. Great name. Like, Trinelius Tatum, that's an awesome football name. He's also a decent player. Leads the team with 4 tackles for loss. Also has a forced fumble, 29 total tackles on the year. So watch out for Trinelius. Number 4, Warren Burrell is their best defensive back. He is a transfer from Tennessee. He's got 19 tackles, but he's made some plays on the ball when it's thrown his way. 4 passes deflected. He is not a good tackler, though. That's his weakness, so I wonder if Notre Dame is going to try to throw his way in the screen game. The screen game has been working for Notre Dame as of late, so I could see that being a potential mismatch for the Irish. And look, when you look at this defense overall, there just aren't that many playmakers. They have only forced 5 turnovers this entire season, which is 110th in the country. And when you consider the lack of sacks on top of that, Notre Dame should be able to avoid self-inflicted mistakes and keep drives alive, because I just don't think that there's a lot of guys in this Georgia Tech defense that are going to scare you. As a group, they're good. They're sound, right? They can stop the run, but Notre Dame has better players, and that leads me to my keys for the Notre Dame offense in this one. Number 1, do what you did last week, but better. We've talked about it all week on the show. The offense that Notre Dame ran against Stanford was, quote, unrecognizable compared to what they ran in the first 5 weeks. That was by design. Marcus Freeman said he told the team he wanted them to look unrecognizable compared to what they had done so far that season. And it worked. It wasn't just the fact that they executed better either. They broke tendencies as well. They threw the ball on first down. They did not run with Riley Leonard nearly as much. I think he finished with 6 total carries, but one of them was a sack, basically. So only 5 true carries for him. They mixed it up on 3rd and short, and that led to Riley Leonard's best game in a Notre Dame uniform. He was operating the run-pass option very effectively, hit a couple of really, really nice passes off RPOs, like I said all week. That touchdown pass to Jane Thomas, that was his best pass of the year. The stakes weren't quite as high as the one to Bo Collins, but the way that he delivered the ball through traffic with a hand in his face and put it into a spot in the end zone where only Jane Thomas could catch it, that's a big-time throw. And he's going to have to make more big-time throws the rest of the season. But I thought his confidence in that game really stood out, especially when you consider he gained his confidence by throwing it and not just running it. Notre Dame might have to run him a little bit more in this game just because Georgia Tech is a better opponent than Stanford. But if they can avoid it, that'd be great. And if they can avoid it, they should give the ball to Jeremiah Love, because that is my second key to the game for the Notre Dame offense. Feed number 4. Love only had 7 touches last week. And I understand part of that was by design, right? Jadarian Price got benched against Louisville. Then he had to just sit on that for 2 weeks with the bye. So I imagine that his confidence wasn't that great. So it was important for Notre Dame to get the ball to Price early on in that game. They did. But Love was barely on the field in that first quarter. He finished with 7 catches. He still broke off a 39-yard touchdown run. So when he did get the ball, he was effective. He also had a really nice play on a screen for a 25-yard game. And as I said earlier, Georgia Tech has a good run defense. They're going to stop Notre Dame when they try to run the ball sometimes. And one thing that's been an issue with Jadarian Price is just too many negative plays. When he breaks it outside, he gets out in the open field. He's great. He is a home run hitter without a doubt. He can be really good with the ball in his hands, but Notre Dame does not want to move backwards or get stuff too often against this defense, and they could do that if they're really clicking in the run game. So if you get Jeremiah Love on the field, even if he's not getting the ball, like he is something that the defense is absolutely terrified of. So they're going to be keying on him. And I just think the more times you get Jeremiah Love the ball, the better. So that seems very simple for this offense. It seems very rudimentary, but considering how little he got the ball last week, I am expecting a big game from him in this one. But I think what everyone is going to be focused on is the passing game, because Notre Dame dictated terms last week against Stanford, right? They were passing the ball all over the field. It's not going to be quite as easy as it is against Georgia Tech, but still, like, Notre Dame has better players, so they should be able to throw the ball. I was really impressed with what I saw from Chris Mitchell last week. It was his best game in a Notre Dame uniform, got his first touchdown, but I'd like to see them hit a couple of those deep shots and actually go for touchdowns. I mean, Bo Collins did catch a deep ball, but Riley Leonard underthrew that. That should have been a touchdown. It wasn't. So Notre Dame has a lot more improvements to be made on the offensive side of the ball. It was really encouraging what they did against Stanford, but now they're going up against a better defense in Georgia Tech. Still not an elite defense or even a good defense overall by any metric. So this should be another important step for this Irish offense as they continue to build towards the end of the season. Sure, the Yellow Jackets are going to get some stops, but if Notre Dame builds off what they did last week and they improve, they should be able to get 30 points with ease. All right, now it's time to take a look at the special teams units, and folks, it might be a mid-off in the third phase. More on that, plus my predictions right after this. Today's episode is also brought to you by Hims. Hims is an exciting new sponsor for us here at Locked On, especially for the fellas out there. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments for up to 95% cheaper. And the best part is the process is 100% online. So it's convenient and there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. You just have to answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider is going to determine the right treatment option for you. And if you're prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. So there's no hassle and no insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. And with hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or for effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Prices vary based on product and subscription plan. You know the rule on this show. We do not forget the third phase of the game. So let's take a look at Georgia Tech special teams going up against Notre Dame special teams. Really, to me, this is going to come down to who can commit less egregious mistakes, because neither special teams unit is really clicking right now. So Georgia Tech's kicker had a great start to the year. He kicked the game winner to beat Florida State in Ireland. The whole college football world was watching. Everyone was excited. Since then, he has not been very good. He's converted on just 6 of 11 field goal attempts this season, and he is just 1 of 6 from 40 yards or more. I'm not sure if he has the yips or what, because he was nails for them last season. You look back at his stats last year, he converted on 17 of 19 attempts, including 7 of 9 from 40 to 49 yards. So this is a strange development. Not really sure what's going on there. Maybe just doesn't really have any confidence. But on the other side, Notre Dame is probably going to be without their starting kicker. So walk-on Zach Yoakum is going to have to kick field goals and extra points while Mitch Jeter recovers from a groin injury. Jeter is listed as questionable right now on the injury report, which basically means he's not going to play. So this is going to be important to monitor, because I expect Notre Dame to be very aggressive on 4th down, even in 4th and long, if the ball is on the Georgia Tech side of the field, because I doubt they have a ton of trust in Yoakum as their field goal kicker. Going back to Georgia Tech, though, their punter, David Shanahan, he's not very good either. He is 97th in net punting average, according to Jamie Uyeyama. And Max Hurlman, Notre Dame's punt returner, is going to have plenty of opportunities to break off a return, because 45% of Shanahan's punts are returned, which is the 8th highest in college football. That also according to Jamie Uyeyama. For Notre Dame, is James Rindell going to bounce back after last week? He had 1 attempt, 24-yarder. It was gross. Now, granted, I would place the bulk of the blame on the snap there, but it's like, by this point in the season, Notre Dame should not have this many miscues on their punt unit or their field goal. there just hasn't really been a lot of good for the Notre Dame special teams this year. So this could be a good opportunity to sort of right some of those wrongs and maybe break off a big return, which they have not been able to do so far this season. But then again, Georgia Tech hasn't been able to do much in the return game either. Although when I was watching the Georgia Tech-North Carolina game, Singleton, the wide receiver who I mentioned earlier, he did break off a nice return against the Tar Heels. So if this game is a blowout, special teams probably isn't going to matter all that much. But if it's a close game, and this is coming down to the wire, I am going to be very worried about the Notre Dame kicking situation. And how could you not be, right? Their starting kicker is out. Who knows what Notre Dame is going to have in Zach Yoakum if the game is on the line and they need him to kick a 40-plus yard field goal. I honestly don't even think Notre Dame would do it. But we are going to have to wait and see, and that leads me to my predictions. Look, I'm going to admit, it's really hard for me to feel confident about a prediction until I know more about Haynes King. So going to kind of take a cop out here. I'm going to give you two predictions, okay? If King plays and he's anywhere near full strength, I believe Notre Dame wins this one 30-17. And if you're like, wait, 30, you think that Zach Yoakum is going to go out there and kick a bunch of field goals? No. I think he's going to miss an extra point, but he's going to make a short field goal attempt. So Notre Dame would win that one 30-17. However, if Haynes King cannot go in this one, I believe the final is going to be closer to 35-7. Even if Haynes King is out there and Georgia Tech isn't scoring a ton of points, because I don't think they will against this Notre Dame defense, they are going to be good enough to keep drives alive and prevent the Irish offense from being on the field as much, and that's going to limit Notre Dame's scoring opportunities. But if it's Zach Pyron out there, I just don't think that Georgia Tech is going to be able to move the ball at all after the first drive. It would not shock me if Georgia Tech puts up points in the scoring on the opening drive, because that is what teams have done against Notre Dame all season long. The scripts have worked against Al Golden, but then he sees it, he figures it out, he adjusts, and then the Notre Dame defense just shuts him down the rest of the game. If Haynes King is the quarterback, I don't know if they'll completely shut him down, but I think they'll have them in control for most of it. If Haynes King isn't playing, this offense should not be able to do anything against Notre Dame's defense. So I trust Al Golden is going to figure it out regardless. But when I look at the game as a whole, this is a big opportunity for Marcus Freeman. In the Brian Kelly era, there would be no doubt that Notre Dame was going to go down there and win this one. It might not be pretty, but you would not be concerned at all about the outcome. But under Marcus Freeman, you just never really know how his teams are going to show up for games like this. It's not a huge game. It's basically a road game, even though it's not going to feel like a road environment in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, because there's going to be a lot of Notre Dame fans there for sure. But there's going to be a ton of Georgia Tech fans as well. It's right down the road from them. Is Notre Dame going to come out ready to play and ready to dominate their opponent? Because I can tell you one thing, regardless of who's the quarterback, Georgia Tech is going to fight. They're going to give it their all. Like I said, Brian Key has gotten a few big wins under his belt already, and the defense is going to be ready to go. They're going to come out playing with an intensity that Notre Dame is going to have to match and actually be better than. And when Georgia Tech played Georgia last year, how do you think the talent disparity looked in that game? It's extreme. The score in that one was only 21-13 at halftime. I watched that game. Georgia Tech was in it. Barely, but they were in it. Georgia ended up scoring 2 touchdowns in the third quarter, so they started to run away, but then Georgia Tech fought back, and the final in that game was only 31-23 Georgia. It is imperative that Notre Dame takes this game seriously, because Georgia Tech is going to take it very seriously. But if King can't go, I just don't think they have the horses in the end, and Notre Dame should be able to shut them down on defense, and that is going to carry the way for the Irish. But even though it's not a big game in the national spotlight, there's a ton of other big games going on in college football this weekend. Notre Dame obviously has to win to keep their playoff hopes alive, but this game is going to go a long way in showing how Marcus Freeman and this team are able to handle success, because they're kind of got a good thing going here. They're rolling a little bit. They looked good last week. They have to keep that going. They have to beat Georgia Tech, and they have to beat them soundly to keep everyone interested in Notre Dame in the playoff race, because if they go down to the wire and they finish 11-1, but they have a bunch of close games against bad teams, people aren't going to look at them the same. So they have to handle their business. I think they will. I think they get it done on Saturday, and they cover that 11.5-point spread. All right, that is a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow morning with the Friday mailbag, so consider this your last call to get your questions in. And also, remember to please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you Friday.